You know those stories that just sort of cling to certain places? The whispers about a street maybe you wouldn't want to wander down after dark?
Yeah, the kind of tales that make the hairs on your arm stand up a little. Yeah, makes you wonder what might be lurking.
Exactly. And that's pretty much the territory we explore here on the deep dive. We try to sift through, fascinating, sometimes unsettling information and bring you the core insights, the stuff that really sticks.
Gets you thinking.
Right. And today, we're plunging into a really compelling piece of modern folklore. It's the urban legend of Demon's Alley.
We've gathered some pretty rich material that really lays out the whole anatomy of this myth. It's quite a study in how these narratives take shape, and why they grab our attention.
Absolutely. This pasted text we have, it essentially maps out the whole phenomenon. It talks about the supposed location of Demon's Alley, the core beliefs around it.
The conspiracy theories, too, which always seem to pop up.
Oh, yeah. And even the bits and pieces people point to as quote-unquote evidence. So our goal in this deep dive is to really dissect this fictional urban legend.
Get under the hood, so to speak.
Exactly. Figure out what makes the Demon's Alley story tick, what anxieties or fascinations it taps into, and what that might tell us about, well, our shared imagination.
It's like an X-ray, isn't it? Of how fear and mystery kind of take root in our collective thinking.
Yeah, I like that, an X-ray. Okay, so according to this text we're looking at, what are the basics? What's the foundational picture of Demon's Alley?
Okay, so the text is clear. This is presented as a purely fictional place. Think of a tight, shadowy alleyway, hidden somewhere in some unnamed city.
Right, not on any official map.
Not at all. But, within local online forums, maybe hushed conversations, it's built up this reputation. A real nexus of evil, supposedly, just saturated with paranormal activity.
And there's this underlying claim, isn't there, that really disturbing things have happened there.
And that someone, some powerful force, is actively trying to keep it all secret.
It's that classic pull, isn't it? The forbidden, the unknown, the idea that there's something being hidden.
Definitely. What's immediately striking is that built-in secrecy.
Yeah.
Why do you think that element, the cover-up idea, is so powerful in these legends? It seems to pop up all the time.
That's a great point. I think maybe the idea that there's a hidden truth, something the powers that be don't want us to know, it just ramps up the fear, the intrigue.
It suggests that the threat is bigger somehow.
Yeah. Bigger than just, a random ghost. It implies a systemic danger. Plus, honestly, doesn't it just make the story more exciting, like you're uncovering something forbidden?
It absolutely does. So the pasted text then outlines let's say, the typical building blocks of the legend itself.
Okay.
We're talking about a dark history, first off. And the text throws out a whole range of grim possibilities. Things like violent crimes, murders, maybe ritualistic sacrifices.
Or even like a forgotten asylum or something, someplace tainted by dark magic.
Exactly. It's like ticking off boxes on a horror movie checklist, in a way.
It really is. And that dark history then conveniently explains the next part, the persistent hauntings.
Right. It's not just a place where bad things happened once. No, it's actively teeming with malevolent spirits, maybe demons, all sorts of supernatural entities.
And they make their presence known how? Like apparitions, weird noises.
Apparitions, strange noises, terrifying encounters, just generally terrorizing anyone who goes near. It's the past, literally refusing to stay buried.
Okay, so standard haunting stuff. But the legend apparently includes reports of even weirder phenomena, things experienced by people who actually go into the alley.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really unnerving. The text mentions intense emotional distress, like sudden overwhelming feelings of dread or despair, even physical sickness.
Physical sickness, wow.
Yeah. And some accounts go even further. They describe altered perceptions of reality, even strange temporal anomalies.
Whoa, hang on. Temporal anomalies, like disruptions in time?
Exactly. Disruptions in the normal flow of time. What do you think adding something like that does for the legend's power?
That's fascinating. I think it elevates the threat beyond just, ghosts or banging noises. Time is so fundamental to how we experience reality. Messing with that, it adds this whole other layer of disorientation, real unease.
Makes it feel genuinely other.
Yeah, like Demon's Alley is truly outside the normal rules of the world.
Precisely. And then, sort of underpinning all this creepy activity, is that alleged veil of secrecy we touched on earlier.
Right, the cover-up.
The narrative insists the city, maybe local authorities, they're actively suppressing information about Demon's Alley. They're discouraging visits, shutting down investigations, anything to keep the truth hidden.
So it creates the sense that the danger isn't just supernatural, it's systemic too. Someone is actively trying to keep a lid on it.
So, okay, we've got the creepy location, the terrifying history, the hauntings, the really weird phenomena. That seems like the core of the legend.
Yeah, that feels like the foundation. But then you mentioned the pasted text dives into even more elaborate stuff.
Oh yeah, the conspiracy theories. This is where the explanations for why all this is happening in Demon's Alley get. Well, they get pretty far out.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's hear them.
All right. So we move from maybe local spooky tales to much grander, more unsettling explanations. One of the big ones. Demon's Alley is a literal gateway.
A gateway.
To where? To another dimension. A portal allowing malevolent entities, demons, maybe other things, to cross over into our reality.
Okay, wow. So it's not just haunted, it's an active doorway for evil.
Pretty much. What kind of underlying fears do you think a theory like that taps into?
Definitely the fear of the unknown, right? Of forces way beyond our control or comprehension just breaking into our world. It's like the ultimate violation of safety.
The boundaries thinning out.
Yeah, the idea that the walls between worlds are just thin in this one specific grimy alley, that's deeply unsettling.
It is. Then there's another theory. Demon's Alley is still an active site for occult rituals.
Active now.
Supposedly. The idea is you've got secret societies, maybe covens, using the alley for dark practices, trying to summon something or appease supernatural powers.
That taps into that whole cultural fear of secret groups, doesn't it? Hidden societies wielding unseen influence.
Absolutely. It brings in that element of, powerful hidden groups operating just outside our awareness.
Yeah.
That's a common thread in a lot of conspiracy stuff.
Definitely. Okay, what else? You mentioned government experiments earlier.
Right. For those who like a bit of government paranoia mixed in, the text mentions the theory that Demon's Alley was the site of some secret government experiment that went horribly wrong.
Oh boy. Like what kind of experiment?
Paranormal research is mentioned, mind control, maybe trying to manipulate supernatural forces.
Yeah.
And it all backfired, leaving this lingering scar on the location.
Why do you think that idea, the failed government experiment, is such a popular trope in these stories?
Well, it bundles together several potent anxieties, doesn't it? You've got distrust of authority, fear of science going too far, the unintended consequences.
And the idea that powerful institutions are messing with things they don't understand.
Exactly. It's like a perfect storm of modern anxieties, all focused on this one mysterious place.
Okay. Any other major conspiracy theories?
There's one more outlined. It's the idea that Demon's Alley itself acts as a kind of accumulator or an amplifier of negative energy.
Like a battery for bad vibes.
Sort of.
Uh-huh.
A focal point of urban evil that then spreads its dark influence outwards into the surrounding city. Like the alley is a wound, poisoning the area around it.
That's more metaphorical, maybe, but still really unsettling. The idea that a place itself can become inherently tainted.
It suggests the very nature of the location is corrupted, beyond just specific events that happen there.
Wow. Okay, so these are some pretty extraordinary claims. Gateways, secret rituals, failed experiments. Now, to make people believe this stuff, the pasted text mentions the kinds of evidence that proponents cite.
Right. But it's really crucial to talk about the reliability, or usually the lack thereof, of this evidence.
Good point. So what kinds of things are mentioned?
Well, first up is eyewitness testimony. Accounts from people who claim to have had terrifying or inexplicable experiences in the alley.
Which, okay, can sound convincing, but human memory is tricky.
Extremely tricky. It's not a perfect recording. Our perceptions are so easily influenced by fear, by suggestion, by what we expect to see, especially in a creepy place.
Yeah, definitely. What else? Photos and videos?
Yes, the photographic and video evidence. Usually grainy, blurry, out-of-focus images or shaky clips that supposedly capture something paranormal. We've all seen that kind of stuff online.
Why is that sort of evidence so hard to verify? It seems so common.
Well, the ambiguity is really the key. Our brains are wired to find patterns, even in randomness. So in a low-quality image or a shaky video, it's incredibly easy to see what you want to see or what you fear.
Like seeing faces in clouds.
Exactly. Pareidolia. A lack of clarity becomes an invitation for interpretation, and it often leans towards the sensational explanations. That's more exciting.
Okay. The text also mentions historical anomalies, like gaps in records.
Yes. The idea is that there are unexplained gaps or inconsistencies in local historical records, right around the time the supposed dark events in the alley's past were meant to have happened.
And the absence of information is then presented as proof of a cover-up.
Right. But what's a more likely mundane explanation for gaps in old records?
Well, records get lost, right? Fires, floods, simple neglect, poor record keeping back in the day. Lots of reasons.
Precisely. Jumping straight to deliberate conspiracy to erase history just because a document is missing. That's a pretty big logical leap. It requires assuming intent without evidence.
Makes sense. Then there are architectural oddities, strange features in the alley itself.
Yeah, unusual or just unsettling features of the alley or the buildings around it. And these get interpreted as having some kind of occult significance.
How do our minds kind of play tricks on us there when we look for meaning in buildings?
Again, pareidolia plays a role, seeing patterns. An oddly shaped window, maybe a strange carving, some weird graffiti. If you're already primed to believe the place is evil or occult connected, these things suddenly take on sinister meaning.
Context is everything.
Hugely. And finally linked to that is the interpretation of certain symbols or patterns found in the alley's design, seeing them as having some dark occult meaning.
But symbols can mean anything, can't they? Unless there's a clear historical link.
Exactly. Symbolism is inherently subjective. What one person sees as a demonic sigil, another might see as just, weird brickwork or random vandalism. Without a solid connection, it's mostly speculation.
Okay, so the evidence is questionable at best.
To put it mildly.
So who or what are the supposed inhabitants then? The entities associated with Demon's Alley, according to these theories. The text gives us a kind of paranormal bestiary, right?
It does. Unsurprisingly, top of the list.
Yeah.
Demons. Classic, malevolent, intelligent entities looking to cause torment or corruption.
Which fits neatly with that whole demonic gateway theory.
Perfectly. Suggests a direct pipeline to evil from somewhere else.
Okay. Then we have ghosts, basically. Restless spirits.
The ghosts of those who maybe died violently or tragically in the alley. They're trapped, possibly reliving their suffering. This ties directly back to that dark history part of the legend.
What's the appeal of the restless spirit idea in folklore, do you think? Why is it so enduring?
Well, the restless spirit often embodies things like unresolved trauma or a sense of injustice. It lets stories explore themes of death, loss, unfinished business lingering beyond the grave. It gives tragedy a kind of tangible presence.
That makes sense. And then shadow people, those seem more modern.
They do feel a bit more contemporary, yeah. Those fleeting, dark, humanoid figures you glimpse at the edge of your vision, often associated with feelings of intense dread and unease.
They seem creepier because they're so indistinct, maybe.
I think so. They tap into a more nebulous fear, something unseen, unknowable, lurking just outside your focus. Their lack of clear form is unsettling because your mind tries to fill in the blanks, often with your worst fears.
Right. And the text mentions one more type, interdimensional beings.
Yeah, this one pushes it more towards sci-fi. Entities from other realities or dimensions, supposedly drawn to Demon's Alley because of its unique properties, maybe that gateway aspect again, or the energy concentration.
So it's blending traditional haunting ideas with concepts from science fiction.
Exactly. It reflects a more contemporary way of thinking about the unknown, pulling in ideas from theoretical physics alongside ghosts and demons. It just broadens the potential sources of the evil associated with the place.
Okay. Now we keep coming back to this crucial element, the alleged cover-up. You said the text outlines the key components of how this oppression supposedly works.
Yes. It details a few key actions. First, the active discouragement of investigation. Authorities, or whoever they are, supposedly discredit eyewitness accounts. They steer people away from looking too closely.
Trying to maintain the official, mundane explanation.
Right. Then there's the alleged destruction or hiding of evidence. Actual physical evidence, historical records, documents, maybe artifacts found in the alley, supposedly being deliberately concealed or destroyed.
Why is that specific element, the idea of destroyed evidence, so important for the conspiracy narrative?
Well, the biggest problem for any extraordinary claim is the lack of concrete proof, right? So if you introduce the idea that evidence is being actively destroyed or hidden...
then the lack of evidence becomes evidence of the cover-up itself.
Precisely. It neatly explains away the absence of proof and even twists it into further proof of the conspiracy's power and reach. It's a classic conspiracy logic leap.
Clever in a way. And the last part, disinformation.
The pasted text mentions disinformation campaigns. Efforts to spread false or misleading information, create alternative, non-supernatural explanations for anything strange that happens there. All part of controlling the narrative.
Keep people confused, offer plausible deniability.
Exactly. It reinforces that idea of a deliberate effort to conceal the real truth, making the conventional explanations seem suspect and strengthening the pull of the hidden, darker story.
Okay. But, as the pasted text itself acknowledges, right, we need to approach all this with some serious skepticism. There are very plausible, non-supernatural explanations for why a place like Demon's Alley might feel creepy and why these stories might start.
Absolutely. And the text points these out. Firstly, just simple urban decay. A neglected, isolated alleyway, especially if it's dark, confined, maybe smells bad, they can naturally evoke feelings of unease, even fear. Our environment hits us psychologically.
Sure, a rundown alley feels different than a sunny park.
Definitely. And then there's the huge factor, the power of suggestion.
Right, if you go somewhere expecting it to be haunted.
You're already primed to interpret everything through that lens. Ambiguous sounds, shadows, even just a cold draft, they suddenly seem significant, confirming your expectations.
It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, you're looking for ghosts, so you find ghosts. And misinterpretation of normal sensory input is a big part of that. In a tense, spooky environment, your senses are heightened. A creaking pipe becomes a footstep. A fluttering piece of trash becomes a figure. A shadow tricks your eye. Anxiety makes us jump to conclusions.
Especially supernatural ones, if the place has that reputation.
And ultimately, as the text concludes, there's just a fundamental lack of verifiable evidence for any of the extraordinary claims about Demon's Alley.
Despite the stories, the blurry photos.
There's no credible, repeatable scientific evidence. No proof of demons, interdimensional portals, secret government plots related to this fictional alley.
The burden of proof is on the person making the wild claim, right?
Always.
Yeah.
And in this case, the evidence cited for Demon's Alley just doesn't stand up to any kind of critical look. It stays firmly in the realm of fiction, of folklore.
So, wrapping up our deep dive into this intriguing case of Demon's Alley based on the text we've explored, it's pretty clear we're looking at a really well-constructed fictional urban legend.
Absolutely. It pulls together classic horror elements, it definitely taps into some deep-seated fears we have, and it even cleverly offers its own built-in explanations for why there's no real proof.
Which is fascinating in itself.
What's really insightful, I think, is how this fictional legend mirrors the structure and the themes we see in so many real-world urban myths, and even many conspiracy theories.
Yeah, how so?
It just highlights our enduring fascination with the mysterious, doesn't it? With the forbidden, with the idea that maybe there are hidden realities, secret histories, just simmering beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
It really does make you wonder, though, even knowing Demon's Alley is presented as fictional here, what real anxieties might fuel a story like this? Anxieties about our cities, maybe, about hidden parts of history, about the unknown.
That's the key question, isn't it? What does a legend like Demon's Alley, even in its fictional form, tell us about the places we live? And maybe more importantly, about the stories we tell ourselves about those places.
That's a great thought to end on. These stories, even fictional ones, they act like a kind of cultural mirror.
Reflecting our collective anxieties, yeah. Our desire for explanations when things feel chaotic or scary. The way we try to grapple with the unknown, the unsettling parts of the world.
Well, that brings us to the end of this particular deep dive. It's been fascinating navigating the shadowy corners of the Demon's Alley legend with you.
Likewise, a great example of modern myth-making.
So thanks everyone for joining us. Until our next exploration, keep those curious minds working.